I forget what year this was, but I read a book called No Shortcuts by Jane McAlevey.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a pretty storied labor organizer who sadly passed just a few years ago, which is a shame because we could use her now. In it, the book really talks about the difference between organizing and mobilizing. The developing a deeper theory of power in which power really is accessible for people who are willing to organize and to take it in many ways. In that we, in our society, even in like liberal circles, still kind of have this vision that there is an elite who's like worthy of wielding power and the rest of us kind of have to like, let them do it. And her argument is like, that's simply not true. That really power is for everybody. But it requires organizing to bring it around. It requires trust building and relationship building. And I read that, and it kind of changed my life, actually, because I began to think that, like, I spent a lot of time, especially coming back. My last trip to Afghanistan was in 2018, and it was just, to call it disillusioning would be an understatement. I was there for 6 months, hadn't been there in 7 years, and I was like, okay, well, nobody has any new ideas. This is insane. And I came back and I was really kind of just at a loss of what to do. And I decided to kind of opt out. And I moved back to my hometown, became an oyster farmer, started working on the ocean, and really wanted to just check out. But while I did that, I also began to connect with my community. And I live in a town of 1,000 people. It's the town I was born and raised in. I wound up on the planning board. I wound up being the harbor master. And in doing all that, I began to see like really the value of building trust and relationships and just organizing on the ground. And I also began to realize that organizing is actually not that complicated. It's just really hard. And that there is no graduate version of it. It's all 101 stuff.
And it's hard because it is difficult to get people to participate, to care, to sort of break down barriers.
Well, and because you have to put a lot of time, unpaid labor, into it. You have to believe.
Yeah.
And you have to go out into your community and you have to tell people what you believe, which is also hard. And it requires you to kind of open yourself up to a lot of people who, like people who I know, who you have to like kind of say like, this is what I believe. And sometimes people are like, I'm not into that. And you're like, oh, you're my neighbor. That bums me out. But you have to do it. And we had a number of issues in eastern Maine. For instance, there was a school board race. And frankly, an out-of-state PAC came in with a bunch of money and backed a very anti-trans candidate. Mm-hmm. And somebody who'd been on the board for 13 years, who was well respected in the community, who everybody liked, lost his seat. And a month later, the school district pulled back protections for LGBTQ kids that had been there for 6 years. For no reason. Just
outside
because
PAC getting involved in a local school board race in Sullivan.
Technically in Franklin, but yeah, it's like we have an RSU, so a regional school
Got
unit. And it was this moment for myself and a few other people where we watched this happen, and it only happened because it was no organizing versus a little bit of organizing. They had people to knock doors, and this guy had himself. It's a small town school board race. And there was no apparatus to support him. There was no way of like getting people to knock doors for him. He was calling around almost like frantic, understanding what was happening, like with a week until the election. And there really wasn't anything that existed. And so a number of us, we'd already formed like kind of a small community organizing group, but we use this as kind of an example of we understood that if we don't have people who can make signs and put them up, if we don't have people who can knock doors, who can make phone calls in their communities, talking to their neighbors, people that they trust, or people who would trust them, if we don't build that, then we're going to lose this kind of fight. And so we just started to build it. And we reached out to folks, and we got a number of the other larger statewide groups. We reached out to the local Democratic Committee. We reached out to, frankly, just a lot of individuals who we knew kind of who were worked up about this, because a ton of people are angry. But again, there was no mechanism. And we kind of we realized that, especially right now after Trump's reelection, people want to do something. They want to fight.
Yeah.
They want to get involved. The problem is, in a lot of places, there is there's no room to go into. There's no place, and we figured we just have to build the room. And once you build the room, people come into it, and they start talking to each other, and they start building relationships. And I mean, the way we did it was pretty non-hierarchical. So essentially, like, folks would get together and be like, "This is a thing I care about." So he was like, "I care about that too." And we're like, "Go forth and make that a campaign." And it worked. It, like, we actually wound up like winning the next school board race, and like and we're still like kind of now we're trying to get candidates to run for county commissioner, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there is to me that was it was a moment where I realized, oh man, this kind of power building is very real.
Yeah.
It just requires people to really get out of their comfort zone and start building relationships again. And for me, it was the foundation of when the campaign started. One of the reasons I agreed to do this was purely to use it as a statewide organizing vehicle. With the visibility and the resources that we're going to get, we can take that kind of strategy, those kind of tactics, that kind of on-the-ground trust building that we do, and we can supercharge it, and we can get the labor unions involved, and we can get all the other community organizations around the state involved. And then we can bring in all these people who engage with politics via electoral campaigns, and we can train them how to be organizers and activists in their community. And I think that's how you build the apparatus to knock on enough doors, talk to enough people, and build enough trust. Where, I mean, I'm convinced we're not just going to beat Susan Collins in November. I think we're going to trounce Susan Collins. And if the worst thing happens and we have an election that is contested or called into question, well, we still have an apparatus to turn people out, to actually have people mobilize, and if we have to, resist fascism in the streets with a mass movement, which is really the only way you can. And we're trying to build the apparatus to do both. And when we're done, we want it to stay. I don't want any of this to die, because one single Senate seat's not going to get us universal health care. Yeah. So we're going to need to have the power of people still on our side in order to get the wins we're going to need down the road.
I'm a nerd, so I looked up the election results in Sullivan for the last decade. Quite a bellwether. Mm-hmm. Barely goes for Trump in 2016 by less than 1%, although as you said, it's 1,000 people.
Yep.
Jared Golden barely wins in 18, barely flips to Biden in 20. Trump squeaks out a win in 2024.
Yep.
I'm sure you know most of the people there. What are their politics like? What do people believe there?
Everybody works really hard. Eastern Maine is economically depressed. It's commercial fishing. It is a lot of construction, mostly because we have some pretty substantial summer communities nearby, which brings money in. And then across the bay from us, we have Acadia National Park. So there's a lot of folks that work in industries that are related to tourism. So it's a very working class area, which frankly is, I think, why it is this kind of weird back and forth between Trumpism and not Trumpism. Because, Trump, I have a lot of friends who voted for Donald Trump 3 times. And they hate billionaires. They think corporate tech folks are manipulating all of us. They think that corporate-owned agriculture and food systems are exploiting all of us and essentially poisoning us. They think that hedge funds and private equity are destroying working people's lives. I agree with all of this. One of the reasons they voted for Trump is because Trump came along and he told them the one thing that they knew was true, which is that they live in a system that is not built for them, and somebody somewhere is robbing them blind. And once he said that, they were willing to kind of forgive all the other stuff, because that's the core thing that people understand, that we live in a political and economic system that does not have their best interests at heart. When you tell people that something they know in their bones is real, they're willing to kind of go along with a lot more, I think, afterwards. And one of the biggest problems we as Democrats have had is that we didn't have a counter to that. We told folks that we had to protect the status quo. Yeah. We told folks that, no, the economic system's actually doing great. Did you guys not see that the Wall Street's doing fine? GDP looks great. Unemployment is record low. It's, yeah, but everybody works 3 jobs and they hate them. So it doesn't matter if unemployment's low. Working people are working themselves to the bone. I think that that's why I'm utterly convinced that economic populism, going after the oligarchy, that is how we kind of rebuild trust with working people. And I mean, I say this is not like a radical idea. I mean, honestly, it seems pretty obvious. But the Democratic Party, at least elements of it, certainly in D.C., have really walked away from that. And I think working people walked away from them because of it.